The sharp crack of a fierce slap echoed through the marble-floored lobby of Monarch Financial Bank, a place typically accustomed to a hush broken only by the soft tapping of high heels and the murmurs of million-dollar deals. But that morning, this symbol of refinement became the backdrop for a scene no one could have predicted, a scene that would be seared into the memory of all who witnessed it. "I've already called the police. We don't serve your kind here." The words came out like venom from the customer service manager, Preston Reed. His voice was cold, cutting, and deliberately loud, bouncing off the vaulted ceilings with the authority of a man used to being obeyed. Around him, startled customers froze mid-transaction, turning toward the disturbance with wide eyes and silent disbelief. Heads turned, some hands covered mouths in shock. A few raised their phones, capturing a moment that felt more like a scene from a hard-hitting film than real life. The woman standing before Preston, Zora, didn't cry. She didn't yell back. And she didn't flee. She stood completely still. Her face was turned to one side, her right cheek flushed red from the unexpected strike. But her eyes, sharp and unflinching, never left Preston's face. She looked straight at him as though seeing through the man to the heart of the power he believed he held. Two security guards approached, but they didn't restrain Preston. They surrounded Zora. "You are being detained, ma'am," one of them said, his voice steady but lost, his eyes avoiding hers. No one asked if she was okay. No one suggested checking the cameras. And no one questioned why a manager thought he had the right to lay hands on a customer. Zora said nothing at first. She didn't plead, didn't argue. She calmly adjusted her beige cardigan, now slightly off-kilter from the blow. Then, in a voice low and even, but carrying through the stunned silence, she spoke. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." No threats, no anger, but in every syllable was the quiet weight of dignity, unshaken by a slap, whether from a hand or from prejudice. Behind her, the phones continued to record. A white woman nearby covered her mouth, turned away. A middle-aged man in an Armani suit muttered, "Let's hope she doesn't make a big deal out of this." But no one stepped forward. No one asked, what could have possibly led to a well-dressed, composed woman being slapped in a place like this? Perhaps it was because she was black, and because they assumed she was a nobody. But what no one in that grand lobby knew was that she was not a nobody. And that slap? It wouldn't end as a fleeting scandal. It would be the spark that ignites a reckoning, one where justice would no longer remain a distant, abstract idea. If you've ever witnessed or experienced injustice, especially in places where trust should be a given, share your story in the comments. We read every word and value every experience shared. And don't forget to follow the channel to continue uncovering the truths that deserve to be seen in the light. Some people are born into the bright lights of success. And then there are those, like Zora Timberlake, who emerge from society's darkest corners and become their light source. Zora was born and raised in a working-class neighborhood on the south side of Atlanta. Her mother was a middle school teacher, her father a janitor at a public hospital. They had no riches, but they lived with dignity. Every evening when her father came home in a uniform stained with disinfectant and the scent of bleach, he would spend an hour helping her with math and telling stories of the forgotten souls in the healthcare system, planting early seeds of justice and inequality in Zora's young mind. Her mother, with a gentle voice and eyes that sparkled every time she saw Zora reading, once said something that Zora would carry with her for life. "You don't need to wear a suit to be a leader. Sometimes you just need to know how to kneel, so you understand who's carrying this whole system on their shoulders." Zora was a top student, earning a full scholarship to the state university, but fate had no intention of making things easy. At 23, she married her first love, a young architect she believed would help build their shared future. But 2 years later, he died in a car accident. Zora became a single mother, raising her young son while juggling 3 jobs: cashier, office assistant, and nighttime janitor at a financial firm, where she first glimpsed the ruthless but captivating inner workings of capital. Zora didn't fall. Instead, she enrolled in an evening MBA program, studying from 7 to 10 p.m. after her shifts. Some nights she came home with her hands raw from cleaning chemicals, her eyes ringed dark from exhaustion. But it was always the warm hug of her little boy Jamel that gave her strength. "Mom, I want to be the boss like you someday," he once whispered during a stormy night, the two huddled together in their damp ground-floor apartment. At 32, Zora founded Timberlake Financial, a financial consulting firm, starting with nothing more than a borrowed desk in the corner of a college friend's office. No big capital, no powerful backers. But she had resolve, razor-sharp instincts, and above all, she understood fear, disadvantage, and the yearning of ordinary people. Those denied loans just because they lived in poor zip codes or had unfamiliar surnames. 15 years later, from that single rented desk, Zora expanded Timberlake Financial into a full-fledged asset management and banking group, with over $9 billion in assets, operations in 14 states, and millions of clients. Her face appeared on the covers of Forbes' Black Enterprise, and she became known as the new matriarch of American finance. But despite all her success, Zora never forgot one memory, a wound that time never fully healed. An unforgettable memory. 30 years ago, her grandmother, Eloise Jenkins, walked into a branch of Monarch Financial Bank. With a perfect credit history, stable income as a nurse, and flawless payment records, she only wanted a modest loan to buy her family's first home. But the rejection didn't come from numbers. It came from a look, from the way the bank officer said, "That area requires different standards." From the sarcastic advice, "Better stick to renting, it's safer." Zora's grandmother didn't cry. But she never bought her dream house. She spent her life paying rent, money that could have built equity, laid a foundation for future generations. That seemingly minor decision, that silent denial, altered the entire course of Zora's family. Zora knew this truth intimately. Some things don't appear on balance sheets. Discrimination doesn't show up in financial statements. Bias doesn't get recorded in meeting minutes. But it seeps into every process, from how employees speak, to who gets invited to the advisory desk, and who gets pushed toward the ATM, she once told her board of directors. And that's why, when Timberlake Financial quietly acquired the parent company of Monarch Financial, Zora made an unprecedented request. "I want to go there, in disguise, to experience their service like any ordinary customer, no assistant, no security, no reputation, just a middle-class black woman walking into a bank hoping to be served." At first, the board resisted. Too dangerous. Too risky. You could be recognized, they worried. But Zora simply said, "You can't fix what you've never personally experienced. I don't need a beautiful report. I need the truth. And I need to see it with my own eyes." The night before her first visit, in a sleek kitchen overlooking city lights, her 16-year-old son, Jamel, leaned on the table frowning. "I don't get it, Mom. You already own the bank. You could just issue an order. Why go through all this pain yourself?" Zora smiled and held his hand. "Because if I don't understand the root, I'm just replacing people, not changing the system. And if I let my anger lead without a solution, I'm doing exactly what they expect. Emotional, impulsive, easy to dismiss. Sometimes the greatest power is when others underestimate you, and when you rise, they'll never see what knocked them down." The next morning, Zora didn't wear a suit. She left the Gucci glasses behind. No makeup. Her hair was tied neatly under a cloth wrap. She carried an old leather handbag with all the proper documents inside, under the name Zora Jenkins. And that was the moment the bank she owned began to show its true face. 9:17 a.m. Tuesday. Zora walked into the main lobby of Monarch Financial's flagship branch, the largest in the district, and the very one where her grandmother had been denied a loan 3 decades ago. The revolving glass door welcomed her with chilled air conditioning and the scent of polished wood, tinged with the faint aroma of luxury coffee served exclusively to VIP clients. The space resembled a luxury hotel more than a bank. Marble walls, a mahogany reception desk, and immaculately trimmed green plants placed at precise intervals. Zora, in navy trousers, a simple white blouse, and a beige cardigan, walked slowly toward the waiting line. Today she was not a CEO, no business card, no assistant, no security detail. Just Zora Jenkins, a middle-aged black woman, self-employed, newly relocated to the area, looking to open a bank account. As she expected, the first glance that met her was not a welcoming smile, but hesitation. A white receptionist around 30 looked up, her eyes lingering on Zora's head wrap before dropping away. "Please wait in line," she said mechanically. No questions, no offer of help. Zora smiled gently and stepped into the line. She was 5th in line. The disparity begins to show. In front of Zora stood a middle-aged white man in a suit, clearly a business owner. As soon as it was his turn, a bank employee came out to greet him and escorted him into a private room for an investment consultation. An elderly white couple was next. They were guided to a VIP counter for retirement account support, offered water, and asked if they needed anything. And Zora, when her turn came, she approached the counter manned by a young banker, Aiden Fox, about 24 years old. He gave a slight smile, but the moment he saw her approaching, his expression shifted to uncertainty. His hands, midway through arranging papers, paused. He adjusted his tie and gripped his pen tightly, as if preparing to handle a sensitive situation. Zora kept her warm smile and spoke in a calm, even tone. "Good morning. I've just moved into the area, and I'm looking to open a personal bank account, possibly savings and investment accounts in the future. I've brought all the necessary documents." She handed over her ID, Social Security card, and a printout of her previous bank statements. Everything was organized and perfectly in order, nothing out of place. Aiden took the papers but didn't offer her a seat. Instead, he bowed his head, flipping through the documents as if trying to find something wrong. Yes, you can find all the account information on the bank's website," he said, voice dropping as if embarrassed to be heard. "Or you could open an account through the ATM in the corner. It's faster." Zora smiled, though a slight pang stirred in her chest. "I noticed the gentleman before me was invited for a private consultation. I just have a few specific questions about investment options and fees. If possible, I'd prefer to speak directly with a specialist. It would be more efficient." Aiden grew visibly flustered. His eyes darted to the far end of the room, toward the desk of Preston Reed, the customer service manager, the very man who slapped Zora in the opening of this story. Preston had been watching their interaction from the start, his gaze sharp and assessing. Aiden picked up the phone quickly. "I'll check if anyone is available to assist you." Zora stood still, her eyes calmly watching every movement. Aiden held the phone to his ear, voice hushed and nervous. "I've got a walk-in, asking to meet with a financial advisor. Yes, just a walk-in. I understand, but she's requesting a direct consultation." He hung up and turned back to her with an awkward smile. Currently all our advisors are busy with regular clients. The wait could be quite long. I suggest you register online first. Our digital services are very convenient." Zora nodded gently. "No problem. I'm happy to wait. Or schedule an appointment if necessary." Discrimination laid bare. Before Zora even had the chance to step away from the counter, a white woman dressed in simple business attire entered. Nothing about her appearance or clothing differed significantly from Zora's, but what happened next laid everything out with unmistakable clarity. Preston Reed, whose name Aiden had carefully avoided, immediately rose from his seat and walked over with a welcoming smile. "Welcome to Monarch Financial. We're truly honored to assist you today. You're here to open an account? I'll personally help you." Just a few steps, yet a whole world of difference. On one side, try the ATM. On the other, direct personal assistance from senior management. Zora said nothing. She made mental notes of every detail. Tone, expression, reaction. It wasn't the first time she'd seen this, but it was the first time she'd seen it inside her bank. She turned to Aiden, her voice steady. "So, if I still wish to speak with someone, when would be the next available appointment?" Aiden hesitated, unsure what to say, but Preston had already returned. He approached with folded arms, the posture of someone wielding power. "Miss, I believe Aiden has already explained. For prospective clients, we have certain procedures. I suggest using our online channels. They're highly efficient and, more appropriate for initial inquiries." His eyes on her, cold, judgmental, quietly condescending. Zora remained composed. "I'd like to receive the same direct support as other clients, and if needed, I'm happy to provide additional documents, proof of income, investments, identification. Preston gave a calculating smile. Of course. In that case, we'll need tax documents, business licenses, and financial statements from the past 3 years. That's our mandatory policy for cases, such as yours. Zora understood immediately. She didn't need further proof. That policy wasn't applied to the white woman who had just been warmly welcomed. She nodded politely, thanked them, and turned to leave. But in her eyes was a burning clarity. The truth had begun to expose itself. Have you ever witnessed a moment like this, where someone was treated differently just because of how they looked, their skin color, or their accent? Share your story in the comments. You might help someone else feel less alone. Wednesday morning. Clear skies, soft sunlight, a day that seemed pleasant. But for Zora, this was the day she would escalate her investigation by returning to Monarch Financial with every document in perfect order. In her sleek black leather briefcase she carried government-issued ID, passport, social security number, business license, the last 3 years of tax returns, bank statements from her previous institution, A-rated credit report, utility bills verifying her address. There was nothing left to omit. No valid reason to deny her, unless it was a reason they didn't dare put in writing. Back to the scene, avoiding eyes in eerie silence, 10:03 a.m. Zora stepped into the branch for the second time that week. No one greeted her. No one smiled. Aidan Fox, the young banker from yesterday, glanced at her awkwardly, then quickly looked down, pretending to be focused on paperwork. Vivian Mercer, a senior credit officer in her 60s, typing at a desk across the room, noticed Zora too, but she acted as if she hadn't, turning her head and pretending to reorganize documents on a desk that was already neat. Zora walked to the front desk. She spoke softly. "I'd like to open a checking and savings account and also discuss investment services. I have an appointment." That final line, "I have an appointment," was strategic. It wasn't true. But it forced the system to treat her as if she were a valued client. The receptionist frowned, checking the list. No name matching Zora Jenkins. "Oh, perhaps there's been a mix-up. One of your team members told me I could come in this morning," Zora explained gently but firmly. "I've brought all my documents." She opened her briefcase. Papers lay out neatly like a national loan application. The receptionist, visibly unsure, didn't want to dismiss a client who seemed legitimate. So, she made a phone call to check. When the power hierarchy begins to shift. Just then, Bryson Walsh, the branch manager, emerged from his office. He was the type who always appeared polished. Slicked back hair, charcoal gray suit, shoes so clean they gleamed. But his eyes, cold and razor sharp, revealed a man skilled at manipulation without leaving a trace. He looked at Zora, nodded slightly, then turned to the receptionist. "What's going on here?" Before she could respond, Preston Reed, the customer service manager, entered the scene. He narrowed his eyes the moment he saw Zora. That look said everything. He remembered her. And he was not pleased she had returned. "Mr. Walsh," Preston interjected, "this is the woman I mentioned yesterday. She's already been informed of the required procedures." Zora said nothing. She stood tall, confident and silent, letting them reveal themselves. Walsh glanced at the file. Despite finding no fault, he tilted his head and said, "Well, we have a process. Vivian will assist her." He gestured to Vivian Mercer, who now had no choice but to rise, her expression that of someone being forced into an unpleasant chore. Vivian, gatekeeper of the invisible wall. They sat at her desk. Vivian opened Zora's file as if she were searching for flaws. "I'd like to learn more about suitable investment options," Zora stated clearly. "I currently hold over $500,000 in assets and would like to diversify." Vivian squinted at her, then, without asking further, replied curtly, "Our investment services are typically reserved for clients with at least $250,000 in liquid assets. I suggest starting with a basic savings account, no follow-up questions, no request to see documentation. Just instant dismissal." Zora smiled, then calmly took out her asset portfolio, tax records, and a full list of her current stock and bond holdings. Vivian froze for a moment, then responded, "We'll need to verify these assets. The process will be long and complicated." Zora nodded, gently countering, "In that case, do the clients behind me, the elderly white couple being advised right now, also need to submit verification?" Vivian glanced over, just in time to see the couple happily chatting with another banker about investments. No files, no demands, no hoops to jump through. She didn't respond. Instead, she turned back to Zora's paperwork. Preston interrupts, heightening the conflict. As Zora continued to ask about account terms, Preston suddenly appeared, pretending to assist, but really to regain control. "Is there an issue here?" he asked Vivian, eyes fixed tightly on Zora, full of challenge. Vivian hesitated. She's asking for more details on the verification procedures." Zora met Preston's gaze directly. "I just want to understand why the requirements for me are different from those for other clients." Preston smirked faintly. "We're simply following policy. If this process is uncomfortable for you, there are community organizations that might be more accessible." Once again they suggested she leave, polite on the surface, but laced with condescension underneath. Zora didn't get angry. She simply said, "Thank you. I'll wait for the bank's verification process. Hopefully, the timeline will be consistent with other clients." Preston replied, "It usually takes 7 to 10 business days." At that exact moment, a white man, who had walked in 20 minutes after Zora finished opening his account, received his temporary checks and left the counter with a cheerful farewell. Zora gathered her papers. Before she left, she turned and said, still in her calm voice, "Thank you. I'll be documenting this entire experience so I can form a full picture of the service here." Aiden kept his eyes down. Vivian couldn't meet her gaze. Preston clenched his jaw. They had no idea that the customer they were dismissing held the power to decide the fate of the entire branch. "Do you notice anything troubling about the way this bank treated its customer?" Share your thoughts in the comments. Every story you tell could help dismantle a system that seems untouchable. Thursday, 9:45 a.m. The sky was crystal clear, sunlight cascading across the marble steps of Monarch Financial's branch. Zora entered the lobby, her steps steady, her eyes no longer guarded as they had been during her last 2 visits. Though her outfit remained modest, her presence had changed, the poise of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Today she would request a consultation about a business loan, a service that required structured procedures and often revealed the system's favoritism most starkly. The tension was palpable from the start. From the moment she walked in, Zora could feel the shift in how the staff looked at her. Aiden kept his head down, typing frantically. Vivian Mercer, still rattled from the day before, didn't even glance in her direction this time. Preston Reed, standing near the service counter chatting with a colleague, deliberately let a few words slip loud enough for Zora to hear. 3 days in a row. People like that always think they deserve special treatment. Zora smiled. She had heard enough. She walked directly to the front desk and spoke clearly. "I'd like to speak with the officer in charge of business loans. I'm considering expanding my financial consulting operations. I've brought all necessary documents, a business plan, revenue forecasts, collateral information, and credit records." The receptionist, new, seemingly unfamiliar with Zora, nodded mechanically and looked toward Preston. Preston narrowed his eyes, raised an eyebrow, and gave a barely noticeable shake of the head, a wordless but unmistakable message. "Do you have an appointment?" the receptionist asked. "No, but I was advised by a staff member yesterday that I could return today for assistance." Then, "Please wait in the seating area." How other customers were treated. Zora sat and watched. 3 white clients entered after her, dressed casually, no appointments. 2 of them were promptly greeted by staff. The third, a middle-aged businessman in a polo shirt, barely stepped through the door when Preston hurried out to shake his hand. "Mr. Davidson, here to expand the company with a new loan, right? Director Walsh's office is ready for you. Come on in." No documents, no waiting, no questions. Zora furrowed her brow, then slowly stood, walking over to the front desk again. "I noticed some walk-in clients were assisted directly. I'd like the same service. May I speak with the branch director?" The staff hesitated. Preston reappeared. "I spoke with you the other day," he said. "Our priority is always clients with scheduled appointments and an established financial history with us." Zora remained calm. "I'm here to establish a serious financial relationship with complete documentation. I have the right to access services just like any other client." Preston smirked. "That's what you think. But we have our screening process to minimize risk, and that sometimes means not everyone qualifies for priority treatment." The insult and the unmasking. Just then Zora caught faint whispers behind the service counter. "She's here again. That type is always a problem. Doesn't know her place." No one said it loudly, but no one tried to hide it either. Zora stood up. She walked to the counter where Preston pretended to be busy shuffling papers. She looked him straight in the eye and spoke loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "I don't know what bank policy permits staff to make discriminatory remarks about clients based on skin color, but if such a policy exists, this bank has a very serious problem." The entire lobby went silent. Some customers turned their heads. A man pulled out his phone. A middle-aged woman whispered to her husband, "She's right." Preston stepped out from behind the counter, striding toward Zora, his eyes blazing. "You're causing a disturbance in this bank. I'm asking you to leave immediately before I call security." Zora did not back down. "I'm requesting access to fair financial services. If that's considered causing a disturbance, then the problem is with this system, not with me." Preston moved in closer, clearly invading her personal space. "You don't belong here. This bank is for serious clients, not for—" Slap! No one could believe their eyes. He slapped her, right in the middle of the lobby, in front of dozens of people. The slap and the defining moment, Zora didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply looked him in the eye, her hand gently touching the side of her face, the red mark beginning to bloom across her brown skin. The air turned heavy, thick with shock. Someone whispered, "I got it all on video. I recorded everything." Aiden, hands trembling, pulled out his phone. Zora spoke softly. "You just made a mistake. One you can't take back." Preston growled, "I've called the police. You're under arrest. We don't serve people like you." But this time the silence was broken. A white, middle-aged woman stood up. "You just hit her. I recorded everything, and I'm willing to testify." Another customer added loudly, "So will I. All she asked for was basic service. This is blatant racism." Zora turned to them, calm and composed. "Thank you. I believe the truth is clear enough now." And then the sound of police sirens blared outside the doors. Preston lifted his chin, thinking he had won. But he had no idea that the woman he just struck was the one person with the power to decide the future of this entire branch. Do you believe the truth can be buried forever? or will it eventually come to light? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel. The next part will leave you speechless. The sound of police sirens grew closer, a long, slicing shriek that tore through the thick silence of the bank lobby like a blade. Through the large glass panes, flashes of red and blue light danced across the polished marble floor. 2 patrol cars screeched to a stop outside Monarch Financial. Inside, no one moved, no one spoke. Only Zora stood still, her hand pressed to her cheek where Preston's slap had left a blazing red mark. And Preston? He adjusted his tie, smoothed out his shirt, trying to craft the image of a law-abiding victim, even though he had just committed an act of violence. "They'll have you out of here in minutes," he said under his breath, voice dripping with smugness. Zora said nothing. She knew the storm had arrived, and she knew she was the eye of it. 3 officers. An uneven confrontation. The doors burst open. 3 officers entered. A white man, older, stern-faced, hand resting near his holster. A younger white officer, alert and tense. And the third, a sharp-eyed Asian female officer, observant and calm. Preston rushed forward as if he were the embodiment of order itself. "Thank you for arriving so quickly. This woman has been disrupting the bank for 3 days. Today she became aggressive, threatened staff, and assaulted me." The entire lobby fell into a stunned silence. A blatant reversal of events. A lie bolder than anything Zora had ever encountered. The lead officer, the older man, nodded without asking further and walked directly toward Zora. "Ma'am, please raise your hands and step away from the other clients." Zora lifted her hands, voice calm and steady. "I am fully cooperative. But before you proceed, I request that you review the bank's security footage and videos recorded by customers. I was the one assaulted. I haven't threatened anyone." When the silent begin to speak. Suddenly a white woman, one of the customers who had been filming from the start, stepped forward. "I'll testify. She didn't attack anyone. On the contrary, she was slapped. I recorded the entire thing. You need to see my video." Another man, a middle-aged businessman, spoke up as well. "I was right there. I don't know her, but I know what I saw. That man," he pointed directly at Preston, "hit her. There was no disturbance. None." The pressure shifted. The narrative cracked. The Asian female officer spoke into her radio, relaying something back to dispatch. The other 2 officers slowed down, their expressions now laced with doubt. Zora's eyes never left Preston. "You just made a false statement in front of dozens of witnesses and multiple cameras. Who exactly did you think I was?" Preston froze for a moment. A phone call that changed everything. "I need to make a call. Right now," Zora said to the lead officer. At first he looked ready to deny her, but something in her gaze, a calm, unfamiliar strength, made him pause. "Make it quick. Speakerphone," he instructed. Zora pulled out her phone. She didn't look at the screen. She dialed from memory. It rang once, twice. "Miss Timberlake?" came the response, clear, formal, commanding. The entire room stilled. "Timberlake?" Preston's brow furrowed. Walsh, the branch manager, who had been watching from behind the glass, went pale. Zora, completely composed, said, "Send over the documents I requested. Is the executive team ready?" "They're waiting outside, ma'am." Zora ended the call. Her gaze locked on Preston. "I suggest you spend the next few minutes thinking very carefully about your behavior and the consequences that are about to follow. When true power reveals itself." Just then, the bank doors opened again. 3 figures entered, not customers, not police. A young black woman in an Armani suit carrying a briefcase. An older, silver-haired attorney with a calm demeanor. An Asian man with a tablet in hand, already displaying the bank's internal systems. No one needed to speak. No one needed an introduction. Their presence said it all. They walked directly to Zora. The young woman bowed her head slightly. "Miss Timberlake, the full ownership documents are ready. Our legal counsel is here to coordinate with the police. HR is awaiting your directive." The silence was shattered. Preston went sheet white. His hands trembled. He took a step back. Zora looked directly into his eyes, her voice not loud, not low, but ringing with the clarity of justice. "I am Zora Timberlake, CEO of Timberlake Financial Group. 3 weeks ago, my corporation acquired Monarch Financial. You, Preston Reed, just assaulted the owner of this institution. The prelude to collapse. The lawyer stepped forward, handing a folder to the senior officer. These are the ownership records, the acquisition contract, and all legal documents. Zora Timberlake is not just a client. She is the rightful owner of this entire branch network. The senior officer stiffened. He looked at Zora, then at Preston, who was now drenched in sweat. We'll need to investigate the assault, but the false report, that could lead to charges of obstructing justice. Zora turned to Preston, her face no longer angry, but weighted with deep disappointment. I don't need you to fall to your knees and apologize. What I need is a system that can tell right from wrong. And today, you chose the wrong side. No one spoke a word. Not a single step echoed. The entire lobby of Monarch Financial stood frozen after Zora's declaration. I am Zora Timberlake, CEO of Timberlake Financial Group, and I am the rightful owner of this branch. Shock shattered the faces of even the most confident Preston Reed. The man who slapped her, who shouted her out of the bank, had turned ghost pale, as if all the blood had drained from his face. He looked desperately toward Walsh, the branch manager, as though searching for a life raft. But Walsh's face was also shifting color. His eyes widened and his lips stumbled over the words. Timberlake. Zora. It can't be. Zora gave a slight nod, then took a sleek black leather folder from her assistant. She opened it and removed a stack of original documents, each stamped with bright red seals. The acquisition contract for Monarch Financial's parent company, a certified resolution from the board of directors, a signed transfer of operational control, effective 3 weeks ago. I kept the transaction confidential so I could conduct an undercover assessment, Zora said, turning to the police officers. I needed to experience how employees treat those without power, without status, without a name. Her gaze swept across every staff member. There was no smile, no polite diplomacy, only the stare of someone who now held the power to raise or destroy. Too little, too late. The collapse begins. Preston, as if jolted from a dream, began to tremble. I didn't know. I had no idea. If I had known you were... Oh, you knew exactly who I was, Preston. Zora interrupted, her voice calm, deliberate, ice-cold. You thought I was an anonymous black woman, and you acted exactly the way this system trains people to treat someone like that. Walsh, the branch manager, rushed forward with a forced smile, his voice hurried and nervous. Miss Timberlake, if only we had known. This is all just a misunderstanding, I assure you. Zora spun to face him, her eyes sharp as blades. There is no misunderstanding here. What happened over the last 3 days is the direct result of policies you enabled, segregating customers by potential value, demanding unnecessary paperwork, directing people of color to ATMs instead of financial advisors. I didn't come here just to test you. I came to expose the system you represent, and it just revealed itself in front of the police, your customers, and your security cameras. The first blow. Preston is removed on the spot. Zora's assistant stepped forward and handed her a paper, a pre-prepared notice of immediate suspension drafted earlier that morning. She handed it to Preston, who by now looked like a shadow of himself. His hands shook so badly he couldn't even hold the document steady. You are hereby suspended, effective immediately. Security will escort you off the premises, and the police will continue their investigation into your assault and your false statements. The 2 security guards, the same ones who had once surrounded Zora on Preston's orders, now flanked him. He pleaded, voice cracking. Please. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I'll never do it again. Zora didn't reply. She watched him go, not with hatred, but with the silence of justice. A sudden shift. When everyone scrambles toward the new power manager, Walsh, seeing his authority crumbling, quickly changed his tune. Miss Timberlake, I'll fully cooperate with your investigation. I'm more than willing to assist with your reforms. Zora cut him off once again. You won't be assisting me, because as of this moment, you're suspended too. The reason? Complicity. Turning a blind eye. Failing to intervene during 3 days of blatant discrimination. The lobby fell silent again. Other staff members looked down at the floor. Some swallowed hard. No one dared breathe too loud, because they all knew. This purge had just begun. Zora, not a victim, but the leader of a movement. Zora turned to address the customers and remaining staff. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to change how this bank operates. I'm here to ensure that every customer, regardless of what they wear, what color their skin is, or how they speak, is treated with equal dignity and respect. Because I was once that woman who walked into a bank, only to be met with suspicion instead of service. A ripple of applause began, quietly at first from the customers. Then it spread throughout the entire lobby. Not because Zora was a CEO, but because Zora had delivered the justice so many had long given up hope of ever finding. Who else do you think should be held accountable? Have you ever witnessed a system operating like this one? Share your story in the comments and don't forget to follow so you don't miss the next chapter. When Zora orders a full temporary closure of the bank for sweeping reforms, and the media firestorm begins to spread nationwide. As Preston Reed left the lobby, eyes dazed, clutching a box of personal belongings, a quiet wave of applause rippled behind Zora. Not a celebration of a man's downfall, but a collective exhale from those who had long been made invisible, now witnessing justice come to life for the very first time. A brief declaration, thunder at noon. Zora stood tall, facing every employee and customer present. Her voice was calm, but every word struck like a drumbeat to the heart. The Monarch Financial branch will be closed for the next 24 hours, effective immediately. All transactions will be temporarily suspended and redirected to the nearest branch or online platforms. A murmur of shock spread through the lobby. During this time, we will restructure our entire staffing, protocols, and internal policies. What you witnessed today, excessive document demands, hidden customer profiling, and open verbal abuse, will no longer exist under any institution I lead. The second wave of firings begins. No one is untouchable now. Zora turned to her HR team, professionals in black suits already waiting at the back of the lobby. Please summon all department heads, review every complaint on record, surveillance footage, and staff conduct logs from the past 72 hours. Start with those who participated in or ignored misconduct. Less than 30 minutes later, Vivian Mercer, the veteran credit officer with over 40 years of experience, walked out, her face ghost white. "You applied double standards," Zora said firmly. "You denied me access to investment advising services, despite knowing I qualified. And when I presented documents, you delayed and made subjective judgments." She wasn't cruel, but she did not pardon. Vivian bowed her head. She said nothing. The small cardboard box in her hand symbolized an entire career, one now emptied of trust. She left the bank quietly. No one followed. The most dangerous man, Bryson Walsh, and his desperate scramble. Bryson Walsh, the branch director, stepped forward trying to steady his voice. "Miss Timberlake, I understand what happened was wrong, but I truly didn't know. I never received any reports of discrimination." Zora looked him in the eye, a gaze not of accusation, but one that stripped away every layer of denial. "You didn't need reports, because you built the system that made sure those reports never reached executive desks." She gave a signal. One of her HR officers presented. Surveillance evidence showing Walsh present during discriminatory conversations, doing nothing. Internal emails he authored stating, "Low-priority clients, redirect them to self-service." Meeting records with Preston and Vivian, outlining a strategy to retain VIPs and filter out low-value leads. This so-called low-value group, Zora continued, consisted mostly of black, brown, single women and immigrants, and the system you oversaw made that discrimination official policy. Walsh flushed red, voice rising. "I've given 26 years to this bank. I know the top executives. I know people above your level." Zora stepped forward, her voice quiet, but crushing. "And because of those 26 years, you hold more responsibility, not less." The most dramatic termination. When a silenced voice speaks out. "Your employment is terminated effective immediately," Zora declared, "for enabling discrimination, operating a biased system, and evading accountability. Security will escort you out." Walsh snatched the paperwork from HR, his voice exploding. "You don't have the authority. You don't know who I am. I know people at levels higher than you." A young female employee whispered behind him, "And he thinks we didn't hear the names he called black customers behind their backs." Zora remained silent. The staff no longer hid the truth. Walsh left, his face crimson, suit disheveled, hands shaking with rage and fear. Zora walks into the conference room and orders a total rebuild. Once those who needed to go were gone, Zora turned to the remaining employees. She didn't look at them as suspects. She looked at them as people standing on the edge of transformation. I know not all of you did wrong, but all of you witnessed wrong and said nothing. Today is the day we start over, with a new system, new processes, and a completely new mindset. In 30 minutes, we'll hold a full branch meeting. All positions will be reassessed. Service standards will change, and every customer, from homemakers to hourly workers, will be treated with the dignity they deserve. The first nods, and a spark of hope. A few young employees began to nod. A middle-aged black man, a security guard, stood tall, eyes misty. Thank you. This is the first time I've ever seen someone speak up for those without a voice. Zora looked at him and nodded back. From now on, we won't need to speak for anyone. Everyone will be heard, and everyone will be respected. Have you ever been ignored, dismissed, or forced to stay silent when injustice unfolded around you? Then this story is for you. Share your experience in the comments and follow the channel so you don't miss the next chapter. When the media arrives, the video goes viral, and the entire banking industry begins to shake. That afternoon, as Zora Timberlake stepped out of the internal conference room, where she had just declared sweeping reforms in operations, policy, and personnel, a security guard approached her quietly. Ma'am, the press is waiting outside, and the videos from this morning are spreading fast. Zora nodded softly. Let them in. If we want real change, then transparency is the first step. The truth goes viral. And the nation stops to listen within just a few hours. The video clip of Preston Reed slapping Zora Timberlake, believing she was just another low-value customer, had surpassed 2 million views. Headlines flooded social media and news broadcasts. Black woman assaulted in bank turns out to be billion-dollar CEO of the institution. Zora Timberlake, from humiliated customer to bank owner, who made the system bow. Racism in banking, a visible slap for millions of people of color. A wave of solidarity, and testimonies from the silenced thousands of comments, messages, and emails poured into Timberlake Financial's offices from across the country. A single mother in Memphis wrote, I was once denied an account just because I couldn't speak fluent English. For the first time, I saw someone stand up, not just for herself, but for all of us. A 74-year-old black man in Detroit shared, I haven't trusted a bank since 1969, but today I saw the light again. Hundreds of similar stories emerged from indigenous communities, immigrants, women entrepreneurs, featured in newspapers, podcasts, and television shows. The banking industry can no longer stay silent, praise, pressure, and the first reforms. Other major banks, long silent on the issue of race, were now forced to make public statements. Central Trust Bank issued, we are re-evaluating our customer evaluation protocols to ensure fairness and inclusivity. Union Financial stated, the events at Monarch have made us reflect inward. We will begin unconscious bias training across all branches starting next month. Even the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, OCC, released an official statement. We will be conducting a sector-wide audit to examine the presence of discriminatory practices in lending and customer service procedures. Zora refuses to stop. She doesn't want reaction. She wants a revolution. The next morning, Zora held her first press conference, right in the same branch lobby where she was slapped. Cameras, microphones, blinding lights. But her voice was as steady and grounded as it had been 3 days earlier when no one respected her. I am not a victim. I am someone who saw what was wrong, experienced what was wrong, and now have the power to fix it. Racism no longer lives just in the streets. It lives in offices, in teller counters, in credit forms that seem harmless. I'm not just going to fix Monarch. I'm going to create a new standard for banking, where a person's worth isn't defined by their zip code, skin color, or the clothes they wear. The rapid overhaul, and a promise for tomorrow, Zora officially announced the National Mystery Customer Program, executives disguised as customers to conduct surprise audits in branches. A new fairness evaluation protocol. Customers will no longer be ranked by projected value, but by their needs and dignity. An independent oversight council, composed of civil rights advocates, human rights experts, and people who had faced discrimination in banks the last light of day. But the first glimpse of dawn, as day 4 came to a close, the same day Monarch reopened after its massive reckoning. Zora stood by the third-floor window overlooking the entire main lobby. Below, customers were being greeted with real smiles. There were no forced ATM reroutes, no excessive paperwork, and the employees, some of the same ones who had once stayed silent. We were now learning how to serve with purpose again. Zora closed her eyes. What she felt wasn't pride. It was a quiet peace, knowing that what her grandmother was once denied had finally come true. Have you ever dreamed of a more just system? Then share your thoughts, because dreams will never come true unless someone dares to speak them aloud. That afternoon, as Zora Timberlake stepped out of the internal conference room, where she had just declared sweeping reforms in operations, policy, and personnel, a security guard approached her quietly. "Ma'am, the press is waiting outside, and the videos from this morning are spreading fast." Zora nodded softly. "Let them in. If we want real change, then transparency is the first step." The truth goes viral, and the nation stops to listen. Within just a few hours, the video clip of Preston Reed slapping Zora Timberlake, believing she was just another low-value customer, had surpassed 2 million views. Headlines flooded social media and news broadcasts. Black woman assaulted in bank turns out to be billion-dollar CEO of the institution. Zora Timberlake, from humiliated customer to bank owner who made the system bow. Racism in banking, a visible slap for millions of people of color. A wave of solidarity and testimonies from the silenced thousands of comments, messages, and emails poured into Timberlake Financial's offices from across the country. A single mother in Memphis wrote, "I was once denied an account just because I couldn't speak fluent English. For the first time I saw someone stand up, not just for herself, but for all of us." A 74-year-old black man in Detroit shared, "I haven't trusted a bank since 1969, but today I saw the light again." Hundreds of similar stories emerged from indigenous communities, immigrants, and women entrepreneurs, featured in newspapers, podcasts, and television shows. The banking industry can no longer stay silent. Praise, pressure, and the first reforms. Other major banks, long silent on the issue of race, were now forced to make public statements. Central Trust Bank issued, "We are re-evaluating our customer evaluation protocols to ensure fairness and inclusivity." Union Financial stated, "The events at Monarch have made us reflect inward. We will begin unconscious bias training across all branches starting next month." Even the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, OCC, released an official statement. "We will be conducting a sector-wide audit to examine the presence of discriminatory practices in lending and customer service procedures." Zora refuses to stop. She doesn't want reaction. She wants a revolution. The next morning, Zora held her first press conference, right in the same branch lobby where she was slapped. Cameras, microphones, blinding lights. But her voice was as steady and grounded as it had been 3 days earlier, when no one respected her. "I am not a victim. I am someone who saw what was wrong, experienced what was wrong, and now have the power to fix it. Racism no longer lives just in the streets. It lives in offices, in teller counters, in credit forms that seem harmless. I'm not just going to fix Monarch. I'm going to create a new standard for banking, where a person's worth isn't defined by their zip code, skin color, or the clothes they wear." The rapid overhaul and a promise for tomorrow. Zora officially announced the National Mystery Customer Program, executives disguised as customers to conduct surprise audits in branches. A new fairness evaluation protocol. Customers will no longer be ranked by projected value, but by their needs and dignity. An independent oversight council, composed of civil rights advocates, human rights experts, and people who had faced discrimination in banks the last light of day. But the first glimpse of dawn, as Day 4 came to a close, the same day Monarch reopened after its massive reckoning. Zora stood by the third-floor window overlooking the entire main lobby. Below, customers were being greeted with real smiles. There were no forced ATM reroutes, no excessive paperwork, and the employees, some of the same ones who had once stayed silent. We were now learning how to serve with purpose again. Zora closed her eyes. What she felt wasn't pride. It was a quiet peace, knowing that what her grandmother was once denied had finally come true. Have you ever dreamed of a more just system? Then share your thoughts, because dreams will never come true unless someone dares to speak them aloud.